Hey, Life Designers, welcome to Intentional Tuesdays. This week we're going to be introducing a new subcategory for the Intentional Tuesdays. As many of you know, I am a writer and I'm aspiring fiction writer and a nonfiction writer, obviously, with the Life Design Center as well. As a writer, I basically have three jobs. Writing, of course. Reading is also a huge part of becoming a better writer. And learning about the craft of writing and studying what it means to be an effective writer. And it's through all of these, really, but it's particularly through the last job that I've come to realize how much the process of writing has to teach us about the best way to live and the best way to live a meaningful, fulfilling life. So towards that end, I want to start a new subcategory of the Intentional Tuesdays, and I'm calling it The Right Life. And it will be lessons about life that are derived from my exploration of the writing process. The lessons are going to be incredibly applicable to our daily lives, and it's just going to be another interesting way to kind of look at the life design process. So I hope you enjoy this week's initial episode of The Right Life, where I'm going to be taking one of the probably the most powerful lessons that I've learned about fiction writing, and it also turns out to be a really powerful lesson for how to live a better, more fulfilling personal life. So if you are interested in that, stick with me because we're going to jump right in. If you were to ask any fiction writer, what is your biggest concern? What is your biggest fear when it comes to writing? What do you think they might say? I think most people probably imagine that an author's biggest fear is around the idea that the audience will not like the story, that the story they write will not live up to the audience's expectations. And in fact, of course, focusing on the rewards and the tangible outcomes, of course, these are things that every writer has in the back of their mind. There's no doubt. These things do matter. They are important, I think, for any commercial writer, for sure. But these are not the biggest fear. In fact, if you ask this question of a fiction writer, you're likely to get something like this as a response. I'm afraid that I will write my characters into situations that I can't write them out of. So isn't that interesting? They're afraid to write their characters into a situation in the story that they can't figure out how to get the character out of. Now, you would think that an author has full control over what happens in their own story. I mean, if anybody has control over the characters of a fiction story, it's the author, right? And it just doesn't work that way. When it comes to writing good fiction, the control of the characters and what they do is a lot like our actual lives. We don't have total control over our own environment. In many ways, the characters have a life of their own. Good writers feel the need to be authentic to the characters that they have created. And as the story unfolds out of the author's imagination, the characters react the way that they react. So you will hear many fiction authors describe the phenomenon of writing their characters into situations that are, really tricky, really harrowing, dangerous situations, and they worry that there's just no way to get the character out. So now, as an author, what do you do when you put your characters into this incredibly dangerous, harrowing situation and you, at least for the immediate term, can't figure out how to get the characters out? One of the worst things that an author can do, which unfortunately is very common, is to kind of rely on what I would call the easy button or the hidden escape hatch at the bottom of the cage that nobody knew about until the very last minute, and then, turns out there's an escape hatch. We've all experienced this type of writing, and it feels like the author is just taking the easy way out. It feels like a very cheesy, convenient way to get out of the story. We've all experienced this at one time or another, either watching television or movies or reading a book. And it's annoying. We don't like it. We don't appreciate it as a reader. We feel insulted. We feel cheated. The best writers do not want to put their readers into that type of situation, so they try to avoid having to do that. Of course, the other option for the author who finds themselves in that situation is to just abandon the project altogether, or to go backwards in the plot until you get to a point where your character is no longer entangled in this tricky situation. But writers, like anybody else, writers do not like to throw away good work. So of course, the result of this fear is that authors choose to play it safe. They choose not to write their characters into these very difficult, challenging situations. Instead, they keep their characters on safe ground, on the familiar territory, almost to the cliche type plot lines and scenarios. Now, as you're hearing me say this, you know the other shoe that's dropping. Yes, of course, you're not getting your characters into difficult situations that you can't get them out of, but you're writing bad stories at that point. If you are sticking to the familiar ground, your stories are not going to be as compelling. They're not going to be as interesting for your readers. The authors, they know this is something to be avoided, putting their characters in these situations, but at the same time, they paradoxically know that those are the best stories. The best thing that I can do as an author is to put my characters into a situation that I don't even know how to get them out of, because if I can't get the characters out of them as the author, the readers are never going to be able to predict how the characters get out of that situation. So what is the answer here? What can an author do? There's one word that ultimately is the answer, and that word is trust. The author needs to trust in his or her ability to handle whatever situation arises with their work. They have to be able to trust that no matter what situation they put their characters into, they have the talent, they have the ability to write those characters out of those situations in a way that is high integrity. High integrity for the characters themselves to remain authentic to their character, and also high integrity to the audience, to the readers, to the viewers, who are perfectly intelligent, capable viewers and consumers of the information. You have to honor their abilities as well. So the author has to have a tremendous amount of trust in their own ability, in their own resilience, and having that trust is huge. Once the author has that trust in themselves, they will be able to make those bold moves that ultimately will result in a better work product that we as consumers will all appreciate. So I mentioned at the beginning of this that I would not make this lesson about writing, rather make this a lesson about life. So here it goes. Now, each of us is the author of our own life story. So the question then becomes, as the author of your life story, are you putting your characters, in other words, are you putting yourself into situations where you can be a hero? Or are you preferring to stay in the safe and comfortable territory that you know you will always be able to find the escape hatch, get yourself out? Because if you're doing that, chances are you are not authoring a story that will be very compelling or really worthy of the heroic figure that I believe each one of us has inside of us. So the lesson here, of course, is to trust in our own ability, our own resiliency to overcome whatever situation we are able to get ourselves into. And once we have that trust, we can then be bold. We can then put ourselves into situations that are worthy of the great story that each one of us has inside of us, I believe. So that is it for this week's Intentional Tuesday. As always, I appreciate your time, appreciate your attention. I look forward to our paths crossing again in the not too distant future. Until that day, I wish you all the best and prosperous journey. Take care.